All right. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. We have director Danny Wolf here with us. Hi, Danny. How are you?
Hi, Stephanie. Thank you
Hello.
for having me.
Oh,
Hello.
thank you. And Mr. Skin is here as well. And Danny directed the new documentary, Skin, A History of Nudity in the Movies. And congratulations on all of its reception. How do you feel about it so far?
It's been great. I mean, the media has been quite kind. Skin and I have been doing many rounds and rounds and rounds of interviews. I know Skin's probably done in the hundreds of radio interviews, which is kind of the norm for him.
Yeah.
But the media has been really nice because, you know, if it turned out what we wanted it to be, something entertaining and something fun and something educational and interesting. And I think, you know, the critics have been kind because they acknowledge that's what we did.
Yeah.
And we didn't do anything exploitive or anything, you know, lewd or controversial. That we got, you know, it's highbrow. And I think the critics acknowledge that in many of the reviews. And even these critics that claim to be film experts and film nerds, all when they say they learned a lot, that's kind of the most gratifying part of this, is when a critic tells you they're learning from your documentary. So
yeah,
the media has been really, really good. And
that's so great.
It's nice.
Yeah,
What,
and I real quick,
yeah.
my thing when we started this in 2018, my biggest fear was we do all this work, and you know, and we put our heart and soul into this thing, and it would come out and it would be looked upon as exploitive or a boob fest or something like that. And you know, with cancel culture and the Me Too movement and everything else, that was my biggest thing, that people would you know, be just honest or be against it. And that's the great thing in the reviews for me. I'm flattered how many mainstream reviewers like it, but the thing that made me feel so good was that how they were able to say, like, listen, even though there's all this nudity in the topic, somehow they were able to make it informative, educational, yet not exploitive. And to me, that when I started to read those reviews, I was like, all right, we did it right, because that was our intention. We knew from the start it couldn't be exploitive. We didn't want it to be, but no matter how hard you try, best intentions, it could easily veer that way, and we luckily didn't.
No, it doesn't.
I think when the executive producer, sorry, Stephanie, when Paul Fishbein, the executive producer, and myself went to Chicago the first time to meet with you guys and Skin, that was one of the first things we talked about, was the tone and how this thing couldn't be exploitive or a breast fest, because if it was, you know, we would have been ripped in the media and people would have gotten all on our cases, and we'd be explaining ourselves for the next few months. And we haven't had to do that. So
I mean, you start off so well, because you start off acknowledging all of these things and acknowledging exploitation and the Me Too movement and everything. And I think you do such a great job of showing, you start there and then you talk about censorship, and then we talk about all these great iconic film nude scenes. So what was your approach to this idea? Did you come up with this idea? I'm so fascinated on how this even got started.
Actually, Skin came up with the idea, and it's one of those, because we're in the golden age, as Skin mentions, of documentaries.
We are.
And everything is being covered now. Everything's being done. And it's one of those, if you can come up with something that hasn't, you might have something. And Skin and executive producer Paul Fishbein was like, you know what no one's ever done? The history of nudity in movies. And I know Skin's probably had this idea for a long time.
Yeah.
And you just go, no one's really ever done that. And I remember when I first heard about it, like Googling, like, are you sure? I have a kitty that can jump up there too.
It's funny because right now, he ignored me all day long, and then right now.
So, you know, you start Googling, like, has there been a documentary on nudity in movies? I mean, you start looking around, and because you don't want to do something someone's already done.
No.
And then it was like, no one's ever done this. We should jump on this pretty fast before someone does. And if we didn't do it, somebody was going to do it sooner or later.
Yeah, and I've known for the 21 years I've been running MrSkin.com, I knew this had never been done, but I'm not a movie person. That wasn't my lane, you know. I mean, I run MrSkin.com, but once I got to know Paul real well, Paul Fishbein, my co-executive producer, and he had produced stuff for Showtime and other places, television, and documentaries. It gave me the weight to actually do it, to make it happen. And then he introduced me to Danny, and we had, I had a writer that used to write for me at Mr. Skin that was so important in helping, so that we were able to put this great team together. Because I knew if done right, this documentary would do great because of the subject. People are interested in nudity. That's one thing I do know. But it was how you did it. And I really think we hit a home run as far as the tone and the story and everything else. So very proud of it. And, obviously a lot of it has to do with Danny and the team. But yeah, like I said, I knew this had never been done. It was just so important, if you're going to do it right.
Yeah, definitely. And how did you two end up linking up for this then?
Through Paul Fishbein, my co-executive producer.
Gotcha.
Paul had done projects with Danny in the past, and he knew him real well. And Danny, and see, the thing with I've learned about, documentaries or movie documentaries is you need people. I don't mean this negatively, Danny, but you need like film nerds. Like, I might be a nudity nerd, you could say, and Danny's just like a film nerd. He loves that stuff. And same with Paul and Mike McPadden, who wrote on this same thing. You need people that are passionate about movies to do a movie documentary, because that's really the only way to do it.
Right. And you have all kinds. You have actors, directors, film critics, like all these great people from every arena. Was there anyone in the movie, is there anyone that you wanted that you couldn't get?
Yeah, always. These are cards behind me, and there's a lot of names like Teresa Russell and Barbara Streisand and Kathleen Turner and Gina Day. I can go on and on. You cast a really wide net because you're not going to get everyone because of people's schedules. And you just go after, you pick your movies and you go, all right, who from this movie do we want? And you go out, you try to go after them. You approach an agent, you approach a manager, you approach a publicist. It's kind of tricky, but you cast this wide net. We were very close. I can say, Teresa Russell was on board. I thought we had her, and things happen, and then the man don't get back to you, and then you have to move on. Kathleen Turner was real interested. I sent her questions. We were going to go to New York to interview her, and she got involved in a play, and then her schedule. And we try to work around everyone's schedule to get some. And we're very accommodating.
Quite a get.
So, you just cast it, but I'm happy with who we got, because I love these sort of unsung heroes of film.
Yeah.
The people you would never expect, but should be in here talking, like a Diane Franklin. Why shouldn't she be in this doc? Ken Davidian did a classic nude scene in Borat. Why shouldn't Ken Davidian be in the documentary? He has a lot to say. So I think what people really also like is like the surprise, and I always love that about the docs I do, is who's going to pop up next? Who's the next person you're going to hear from? And it's always someone kind of off center that people who are into film like, wow, they got Mamie Van Doren, or, oh man, Mariel Hemingway is talking about personal best. How cool. You wouldn't think Mariel Hemingway when you're thinking about the doc at first, but she did personal best, Star 80, Lipstick. She's done movies with nudity. Why shouldn't she be in the doc? And she's great.
Yeah, I was thrilled to see Malcolm McDowell personally. I thought he was so funny too. He was so enlightening.
He's the coolest guy to interview. He the way he tells stories, he is like, you're hooked on every word. You're like so engaged in what he has to say. He's a really nice guy. But, again, why shouldn't he be in the doc? He's done, Skin can say he's done multiple movies with nudity. So, but, I like who is in our doc, and I haven't heard any complaints from anybody. In fact, a lot of the reviews always are very complimentary about the cast. And these talking heads we have, of what a great list and a great group of folks we got, and we do.
Oh, definitely. Were there any stories that you didn't end up using in the doc from some of the celebrities?
Oh yeah. I think
anything you can share.
It started at 5.5 hours, and we got it down to 2 hours, so that should give you an idea.
It was 5.5 hours of interviews.
It started. Well, no, it was a 5.5 hour movie when it started. We had to get it down to 2 hours. So yes.
That makes sense. There's so much information. Like, this could have been a series. There's just so much.
That's the hardest part of doing these, is when you have like your first cut, which is kind of your greatest hits. You know, we string out all the best bites, and you have like a 5.5 hour, 6 hour cut. And it's the hardest part is what you take out. It's kind of painful because you don't want to lose. Like Ken Davidian had a lot more to say about having a nude stunt coordinator and not getting and how Sacha Baron Cohen makes these films. And, you know, you can't have, you know, we're 2 hours and a few minutes, which is a good length of time. I mean, one story I loved, and it really didn't have much to do with nudity, but I was such a Star 80 fan and was so happy we included it. And a lot of people don't know that condo where the movie was shot in was Dorothy Stratton's condo in Brentwood.
I didn't know that until I watched the movie. I had no idea.
So the scene where Eric Roberts murders her is the actual spot where Paul Snider murdered Dorothy Stratton, like the identical actual room, the spot where he shot her in the movie is where he shot her. So Eric Roberts and Mariel told the story because I had heard a rumor that Bob Fosse wanted them to sleep in the bedroom the night before they shot the murder scene. Mariel Hemingway says, yeah, that's true, but I split. She's like, I don't need to do that. There's no way I'm spending the night in the room where Dorothy was murdered. Eric Roberts was such a big Bob Fosse fan. That's why he did the movie.
Wow.
He wanted Bob Fosse. He said, I would never say no to anything Bob Fosse asked me. And he said that night he was sleeping in the room and he couldn't sleep. And Bob Fosse was on the couch in the living room sleeping. And Eric Roberts said, I kept yelling, let me out of here. I don't want to stay. And Fosse kept saying, shut up and go back to sleep. We're shooting in the morning. Shut up. And Eric Roberts was terrified. He said he didn't want to spend the night in the room. He wanted to get out and Fosse wouldn't let him. So I thought that's a cool story if you don't know about it.
Yeah.
Not much per se to have to do with nudity, but an interesting story if you're a Star 80 fan.
Oh yeah, that's an interesting legend for sure. That's creepy.
It's very creepy.
Yeah.
Very method.
Very method. I guess going back to more nudity focused questions here. What were your own personal feelings about nudity, and did they change when you were making this movie?
Not that I wouldn't say they changed. There was a lot I didn't know.
Yeah.
I didn't know a lot about, you know, in the 1920s, how major actresses were nude in movies. I mean, you got Clara Bow, you know, Wings is a 1927, a Best Picture, like
it's
the first Best Picture.
Yeah.
And there was nudity, and Annette Kellerman and these actresses that were big names at the time were doing nudity. I didn't know much also about the Hays Code. And I learned a lot doing research and then interviewing authors who've written on the subject, that this code was created in the late 20s into the early 30s where you couldn't have nudity in movies for decades.
Yeah.
And this was strictly, enforced. And it obviously had to do with the Catholic Church as well, and the Legion, the Catholic Church and the Legion of Decency. But then how these kind of outlaw directors like the Russ Meyers or the Herschel Gordon Lewis's started making, these low budget horror nude, monster nudies, and then these nudie cutie movies. And
that was so fun to see too. You show the clips of the monster nude scenes, because I didn't know about that.
I didn't know a lot about it either. I mean, I remember Paul saying, you got to see this movie, like Kiss Me Quick. And I'm like, what's Kiss Me Quick? And he goes, it's this really low budget, like late 60s horror movie. And they have naked girls just doing really nothing, but dancing around like a laboratory. And there's a Frankenstein. And you're like, what are these movies? But it was a way for, filmmakers to get nudity in the movies during the code. Though what it also meant was you would really have a hard time getting distribution, as movie theaters wouldn't really, give you wide distribution. So then you were playing in like small independent theaters in, Times Square, or you were popping up in cities that were not well populated to get your movie in a theater. So that was really interesting. And then what was really interesting, and I knew a little bit about, was in the early 80s, how nudity was required, and the amount of nudity, especially in the teen sex comedies. Martha Coolidge tells a story, she directed Valley Girl, on how, in her script for Valley Girl, there were 3 scenes of nudity, and the actors agreed to do it, and everything was cool. And then Atlantic Releasing, the distributor of Valley Girl, was like, well, we need one more scene with boobs. If you want foreign distribution, you're going to put it in. And she's like, I don't have it in the script. There's nowhere to do it. and I don't have another actress who signed on to do this. And they're like, well, you're not going to get distribution, put it in. So she had to like bring E.G. Daily to the side and say, we're going to add this scene where you're going to be in the bed with Tommy, and it's going to be, and they discussed how they were going to capture the scene, and it was going to be tasteful. And they discussed, and her agent was called to set, you know, and it turned into a big thing because she didn't sign on to do the scene.
Right.
Where was she going to show her boobs, even though she did, I believe, nudity in a movie prior to that. So they talked it through, and it's in the movie. And I thought that was interesting
too.
how certain genres of movies, obviously, like the women in prison films, you know what you're getting. And these movies do so well internationally, you're going to have a shower scene or a cat fight scene or a rape or whatever it is. So that Pam Grier says, you know, you're doing a women in prison movie, you know what you're signing up for.
Yeah.
You're going to be nude in a shower with other women. So it's the distribution of nudity in the 70s and 80s was kind of fascinating. And we cover it in the documentary. And for people who don't know, I think it's kind of interesting.
And Pam Grier is also speaking in the documentary. So if you haven't seen it yet, that's so much fun to see. Did you get to interact with Pam a lot?
She lives in Colorado, just outside Denver. And a quick story, we interviewed her in our previous doc about cult films for Foxy Brown and Coffee. We flew to Denver, interviewed her. She's great, has a lot of stories to tell. So when we go back to Denver and said, we'd like to interview you for a documentary about nudity and movies, she's like, great, come to Denver. We found a home, because she lives on a ranch and the animals are loud. So she doesn't like interviews at home. She has horses and dogs and all sorts of farm animals. So we rented this house. And we did her interview in a basement of like a Airbnb type house. And it was so dark and eerie. It took forever to light it. Then you start interviewing Pam and she talks. Yeah. So the 90 minutes I had with her, you know, an hour in, I'm on question 6 and I have 30 questions. And you start kind of freaking out. And then we have a flight we have to catch back to LA like early evening. So we get done with the interview and I tell our DP and Christine, our producer, we're not going to make our flight. Like, if you were calling Uber now, but we're not going to make it. Pam goes, don't call Uber. I'll drive you to the airport. Come with me in my car. I'll get you there quicker. If you don't make the flight, stay at my place tonight. We'll have a movie night. She has a movie room. She watches movies. And I said, so if we miss our flight, can we watch Jackie Brown? Like, I'd love to watch it. And she's like, sure. She rushes us to the airport like a dummy. I go, you know, we're fine, Pam. We're going to make our flight. She actually waited outside the airport. I should have said, no, we're going to miss the flight.
Right.
And movie night, Pam Grier is watching Jackie Brown. And
wow.
It would have been so cool.
Missed opportunity.
I don't know what I was thinking. I think we just, you know, let's get back to LA.
But
blown opportunity. I'll never get back again.
Wow, that's so kind of her.
She's so sweet and so nice, and Skin can tell you, I don't know how many movies she's done with nudity, but it's got to be at least 10, huh, Skin? Well,
you had mentioned your the documentaries you did before about cult films and midnight movies and stuff, and I was kind of curious about how those might have influenced this movie at all, or did anything that you did, I know you just mentioned Pam Grier and those films, did they show up in this movie as well?
Yeah, we covered a few of the same, like Amy Heckerling for Fast Times Ridgemont High. Now that's a big cult film. We went to New York and interviewed her. She's totally cool. She was like
great
clueless
in the documentary. I was like, I want to hang out with her.
She's great. She's really nice. And so we had her in Time Warp, which is the cult films doc, talk about Phoebe Cates and that iconic scene. Of course, how would you not talk to her about that when you have an interview with her? So that's in our cult films doc. But then when we started this, it's like, we need to interview her again. How can we not interview Amy Heckerling separately for this documentary? And again, about Phoebe Cates and not just that scene, but the scene with Robert Romanus and Jennifer Jason Leigh in the pool house and the scene in the dugout. I mean, there's more than just the Phoebe Cates scene.
Right.
So we called her up and said, can we come back to interview you again? And she was so nice. She's like, of course. Some of these people are actually honored and like to talk about their movies, and
Yeah.
like, sure, come to my townhouse. If you're going to be in New York, we'll do it. And that's really nice when, I mean, I would say, yeah, only a few movies in the cult doc sort of moved, you know, Valley Girl was another one. Hedwig and the Angry Inch, we covered in the cult doc.
Yeah.
Though you see John Cameron Mitchell in this doc briefly. We'd interviewed him for Short Bus.
Oh, wow.
For this documentary.
Yeah.
And I think that was that was probably in the first cut of this. We had Short Bus in there. But again, when you need to cut 3.5 hours down, you're going to unfortunately lose some films.
Mm-hmm.
And that was one of the ones we lost, but at least he's in the doc. And when you interview anyone, you don't want to cut them.
Right.
So if they had anything to say, you want it, because they gave us their time.
Yeah.
And in case you want to interview them in the future, you know,
right.
kind of want to be friends with them. So he's awesome. He was really nice both times we interviewed him. And yeah, I'm glad we included him. But
yeah, I was happy to see him in there. I mean, Short Bus is also insane. So
the nudity in Short Bus is much. That's goes in another world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That would have been hard to put into the documentary and keep our rating.
Actually, you're right.
Yeah.
I don't know if Short Bus was probably an unrated movie.
Oh,
I'm guessing it was unrated. It wasn't R.
Yeah, no, it was not R. But imagine if it was in there.
But you know, that's also, it's really cool, Stephanie, when the person you're meeting to interview is as happy and excited to be doing the interview.
Right.
Jump back to cult for a minute. We interviewed Jeff Goldblum for Buckaroo Banzai.
Oh,
and he said the coolest thing when we got there to interview him. He goes, I haven't seen the movie since the premiere, so I watched it last night to brush up for you guys. And then he said, I went on the internet and started doing my research about Buckaroo Banzai and this sort of fandom, just so I'd be prepared for the interview.
Wow.
And when you hear that, you go, you know, this guy's really cool.
Yeah.
How often does a celebrity you're interviewing tell you they're doing their research?
Right. He's taking your time seriously.
Yeah.
That's
so
incredible.
It makes you just like the guy immediately. And he's an amazing guy anyways. He's really fun. But yeah, everyone we interviewed in this documentary, there were no problems. Nobody had any qualms or was upset about any of the questions we were asking. They all had something to say coming in.
That's great.
Like Diane Franklin, like a Linda Blair, Serena Vincent, Kristana Loken. They wanted to be in this documentary and never really were, on the fence about doing it, because they would always say, no, I need to talk about this. Or Erica Gavin, I've got a story to talk about how nudity basically affected my life. Not really my career, but my life. So
that was really interesting to hear. People were coming at this from all sides of the spectrum, basically. Some people didn't affect them. Others, like you just mentioned, it affected their personal lives. Has this influenced future projects for you? Is there anything coming up that it will also involve nudity, or are you going in a different direction?
This is a lot of docs we're talking about now. And I've told Skin the one I'd like to do next. I think if you want a companion or a follow-up to this Skin can tell you the title, or I don't know if we want to divulge in case someone.
Yeah, probably best to keep it secret for now.
Keep it secret.
It would have to do with nudity. That for me, that's like my lane and where I feel most comfortable. But there's a lot of options. So we have an idea for something in the horror genre. We have some idea for a cool follow-up to this that's in the same ballpark. But we're going to wait a little while and see how this does. We're really confident. The early returns are fantastic, and we think this is going to do great. And it'll give us a lot more pull when we decide on the second one and who we approach about where it ends up playing. So it could be something's going to happen. It's just a question of when we're going to start up again.
Wow.
And then also what's interesting is now, if we do a follow-up to this, it'll be easier to get bigger names or other actors and actresses, because we have a calling card. So if, you know, if there's anything going on with Teresa Russell, we can send Skin and say, this is our work. This is how we approach the topic. This is how
Not
we
me
cover.
personally, the movie.
No, no, right, right. So it's nice to have this for the next one to send out to people to say, this is how we do a documentary. This is our work. We will accompany like the Variety and Hollywood Reporter and CNN and Yahoo Entertainment reviews so they can see how positive they are. But yeah, to do a follow-up like we've talked, and I've been asked by a bunch of interviewers about it, you know, are you going to do a sequel?
Right.
We've done the nudity, but there are a few other ideas and avenues we can approach that could be equally as cool as this one.
That's exciting. I'm excited about the idea of you guys working together again too. This was great. We're about out of time here though, so
that was fast.
I know, right?
Time flies when you're talking about nudity, Danny.
That's the Mr. Skin way, right?
Exactly.
Been in business for 20 years for that reason.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for talking to us, Danny. And for anyone watching who hasn't seen it yet, please check out Skin, A History of Nudity in Movies. It's available on Amazon, iTunes, Vudu,
Apple TV, wherever.
Apple TV.
Yeah.
Direct TV, video on your cable systems. Yeah,
You guys know how to watch movies. But thank you again.
Thank you, Stephanie.
Yeah.
Thank you, Skin.